Welcome back to another one. So in this video, we're going to be talking about prescribed fires. We'll be covering the tools, equipment, clothing, and personnel you're going to need in order to do a prescribed fire properly. We'll also be showing you a prescribed fire in action. But without further ado, let's just get right into the video. So the points we're going to be covering in this video is why, the benefits, when, and how to burn. So why do we burn? There's three main reasons. The first reason is to use as a tool for property management. The second reason is because it's beneficial for all wildlife, not just whitetail. Even though we are specifically talking about whitetail in this video, it is beneficial for all wildlife. And the third reason being to educate, just as my dad's educated me and helped me to realize that not all fire is a negative thing, but can be very positive, like we said in the last point, for all wildlife. But specifically, we focus on whitetail deer because that's what this channel is about. And I understand that many people are afraid of burning because they see all these forest fires on the news, and they think that, well, if I try to do that, it'll end up in the exact same way, and it's always going to be like that. But that's just not true. As long as you take all the safety precautions, like creating fire breaks, making sure they're clear before you burn, making sure the weather conditions are good, and all that stuff, and you make sure you have enough manpower to manage the area you are looking to burn, you should be completely fine. There's no reason to worry as long as you take all those safety precautions.
So now we're going to talk about the different benefits that we get from using fire on our property. So one of our favorite things that we see when we use fire is when we remove all of the leaf litter and the different plant species after the fires ran through the property. All of the seeds that are in the seed bank start to sprout up. We get to see how many different kinds of plants that are going to respond to that fire. And it's really exciting to see the different types of plants, especially when you can go in there with some kind of a plant ID app or book, and you get to see the types of plants that your deer will benefit from. The other benefit that we like to see is when we look at our tree species or our shrubs, when they get to that age where they're a little bit too tall for your deer to use as food sources and cover, as well as they become more of a shade issue where they're shading out all of the vegetation at the lower level in your forest. That fire will top kill all of those small trees and shrubs. And when that happens, it allows more sunlight to come into your forest, as well as it sets those trees or shrubs back to where they sprout from the rootstock, and you have small shrubs and small trees that your deer will utilize as food as well. And of course, once those trees or shrubs get to a certain height, they also are a benefit for cover for your deer and other animals in the wild. And then the final benefit that we would like to talk about is all of the different types of plants, especially for the people that live in the South, because we get a lot of vine species such as the brambles, muscadine, a lot of other small vine species, greenbrier, and a lot of times they'll get so thick in there that they'll actually create a problem to where the deer can't even travel through those areas. And the fire is a great tool to be able to get all of those vine plants and even sometimes big, thick shrubbery type plants. It'll burn and kill those vines and those shrubs to where your deer can utilize the area and be able to move through it without any problems as far as their travel. And that's another benefit of the fire. And of course, by setting those plant species back, you also give a much better food source for the deer as well. All right, guys, so now we're going to talk about when we should burn. So there are really two different times of the year that most people like to burn when it comes to habitat management. And the most common time of the year is usually in the early spring, just before the spring green up. People want to burn because all of the vegetation, whether it's in the fields or whether it's in the forest, those plants are already in their dormancy stage, or they're dead. And so they're much easier to burn. They become an easier fuel source. And that's why most people like to do it, whether it's burning their grasses in their fields. And of course, when it comes to like a farming or like cattle, obviously they burn their grasses for the benefit of, helping to get rid of the old dead grass to make room for the new green grass growth that's going to come in the spring. But for habitat management, we want to burn because we're trying to promote other plant species to grow in whether it's the fields, our open fields, or in our forested areas, so that our deer can have food sources that we're providing for them using the fire. Now, one of the downsides to burning in the spring that you have to be aware of is that spring burns are, unfortunately, if you continually do that year after year, even if you wait 1 to 2, even 3 years after that first initial burn, you'll notice that you're going to start promoting more grass species in your forest and in your fields. And of course, when it comes to deer habitat, that's not what we want. It's not a problem having some grass species, especially when we're talking about native annual grasses. But when you're talking about cool season grasses, and even the annual grasses, after a while, you get too many of those species inside of your habitat. And of course, it's great for cover, but it starts to diminish the amount of food you have on your property. And that's not going to be a good attraction for your deer. So we want to make sure that if we're going to focus on our deer food source with our burns, then we want to start also alternating our burns to where we burn also in late summer. You want to wait and burn in the late summer because that will help encourage our forbs and our herbaceous plant species more than our grass species. So just keep that in mind when you're planning your burns, because it is a good idea to alternate that to where you're not always burning at the same time of the year. And the next thing that's important about the wind is based on the weather conditions. It's very important to make sure that when we're burning, that our weather conditions are more favorable for fire. And when I say that, what we're looking for is one of the most important things we're looking for is what our humidity levels are, how long it's been since the last rain, because you've got to take into consideration, especially where you have areas that are either shaded or they're not on that more southerly facing part of your property where they get more sunlight. You're going to have a lot more moisture, especially in your forested areas, because there's going to be a lot more moisture in those areas, because the leaves and the things on the forest floor are going to hold humidity a lot longer. So we need to make sure that the conditions are very dry and that our humidity's at a lower level. Usually we want to range, we look for around a 50% relative humidity. And of course we want light winds where it's around that, under 5 miles an hour wind, which is perfect. And I would say the highest that we would probably feel comfortable burning would be maybe 8 mile an hour winds. And again, we're trying, obviously when we're burning, if we have higher winds, we're going to be making sure we're doing a backing fire and not a head fire. That way we're not having a fire getting too hot or getting out of control, because the whole point of a prescribed fire is that we're in charge and we're in control of how the fire is going to be carried through our forest or through our fields. In addition to just paying attention to the humidity, the conditions as far as when the last time the rain was there, and the wind, is also making sure that we have an understanding of like what's in your area as far as people, businesses, highways, to make sure that the smoke is not going to be a problem as far as where it's going to be blowing. And of course, if the smoke is going to rise, they actually have websites you can go to and actually find out what those conditions need to be, and they'll tell you when it's favorable and when it's not favorable as far as smoke concerns are. And when it comes to safety and all those other kind of things, you need to be very aware of what the conditions need to be for that situation.
This part of the video is going to be explaining how to do a prescribed fire, and we're going to start it off by going through all the pieces of equipment you're going to need in order to do so. The first piece of equipment is the drip torch, which is in the top left corner, and this is what's going to be producing the fire for the prescribed fire, which is pretty much the most important part. Now, you're going to fill it with 3 parts diesel and 1 part gas. The next piece of equipment you're going to need is a backpack leaf blower. This is great for creating fire breaks when you're prepping for a prescribed fire, but it's also great for extinguishing fires if they're getting into the fire break or if they're starting to go on the outside of the fire break, which hopefully that doesn't happen, but if it does, this is a great way to quickly extinguish that fire. The next piece of equipment is a rake. The rake is great for removing duff, fuel, anything around the base of the trees that you want to keep. It's also great for keeping the fire break clear. The next piece of equipment is a water pump sprayer. It's very important that every single person that's doing the fire either has one on them, whether it's in handheld form or backpack form, but it's important that every single person either has access to it or has one on their person, because you're going to be on different sides of the unit throughout the whole process of the fire, and every single person needs to be able to put out fire at any point in time. The next piece of equipment is walkie-talkies. This is a form of communication that we prefer. It's the best one that we found. So again, just buy yourself some walkie-talkies. It's a great way to stay in touch, because Again, you're going to be on different sides of the unit throughout the whole process, so you need to be staying in touch throughout the prescribed fire. Now I'm going to explain a few of the burning methods we use pretty regularly. So, the first diagram, there's two types of burning, and that is a backing fire and a head fire. So, the wind direction is the white arrows, and the fire line is the red line, and the dots are the burn unit. So, a backing fire, you're going to ignite the fire on the side of the burn unit that's going against the wind. And this causes the fire to burn at a low intensity and at a slow rate. So this fire is great because it is easy to control, but it does require a lot of time and fuel in order to complete the whole burn unit. The next is the head fire. The head fire is completely the opposite of the backing fire. So it's going to be burned on the side of the burn unit that goes with the wind. So that means that it's going to burn at a fast pace and with a high intensity, meaning that it's going to be a lot tougher to control, but it does finish the burn unit in a lot less time. The next method of burning we have is a strip head fire, and this type of burning is burned on a fire break basis. So the first thing you're going to do is create a backing fire, which is a fire going against the wind, and then 20 to 50 feet away from that fire, as you let it burn for a second, as you can see in the middle diagram, you're going to set another fire line about 20 to 50 feet, like I said before, away from that first fire line. And now explain why I say a fire break basis. So you have this backing fire going towards this head fire you created here. So once they meet in the middle, they're going to cancel each other out because they've used all the fuel behind themselves. So now you have all these fire below them that are burning at different rates because you're setting them at different times. But so as this fire, this head fire right here, burns all this fuel in this area, it's going to stop where these two consumed all this fuel. And then it's like a domino effect at that point to where this one stops right there and then this one stops right there. And it's a very quick way to burn, but again, you need to be very cautious since you're setting head fires because they burn at a very high intensity and very quickly. The last method of burning we have is a point source fire. And a point source fire is very similar to a strip head fire. It starts with a backing fire, which is a fire going against the wind. But instead of using strips, you're going to use point sources, or just you're going to drop fire here and just like all the way across the burn unit, separated about like 10-15 feet, however much you want to space it out, and it spreads out in all directions instead of just going in one direction like you would with the strip head fire. And this is great when the weather's unpredictable. But just like the strip head fire, this type of fire burns on a fire break basis, which means that it cancels itself out, and that's how you complete the burn. Now we're on to the part where we actually burn in action. But first thing you want to do is make sure your fire breaks are clear, because we actually had a tree that fell down in the middle of our fire break that we need to clear because the fire could have crossed the fire break if we wouldn't have moved that. And also make sure that your leaves and duff are cleared away from the trees that you want to keep. And then we can begin burning.
Alright guys, so we're fixing to do a small unit here. It's only about 1/4 of an acre. We had a late start today, had to do some work this morning, and this was a very good day to burn because, as you can probably see around us, there's almost no wind today. I think it's 1 mile-an-hour wind, which is really nice for a fire when you're trying to do it, especially for first timers when you're just starting out. Obviously, you want to do it when there's not a lot of wind. I would say the maximum wind would be 5 mile-an-hour winds until you get more comfortable with it, and especially if you don't have a large crew with experience to burn. But we're going to show some different techniques that we use. This is actually one of our highly recommended tools if you're going to be doing a lot of prescribed fires. This is what they call a drip torch. They're like $145 on Amazon. It's very important too. You can buy the pre-mixed fuel as well, but we actually just do the recommended fuel mixture that's used by foresters, which is 3 parts diesel to 1 part gasoline. Don't do it the other way around because you'll have a big fire on your hands that you're not going to want to handle on this little torch. But this is definitely great because you can just walk along and drip. They should be getting some B-roll here to kind of show you what we're talking about as we're burning. But we're going to do a little sample just to show you kind of different types of fire. One of the things we always like to do before we get going is just start a little fire in a spot and kind of watch the fire for a few minutes and just see what it's going to do. If it looks like it's going to be really low aggression or if it's going to be more aggressive, it kind of gives an idea how we want to approach it. Because there's different types of fire techniques. The most common one, and definitely the one you want to spend most of your time using, is what they call a backing fire. So we're going to get started here and start showing you guys how to do this. Hopefully my light will work. Alright, and we're going to get our little tip of our torch. As you can see on the end there, that little screen right there, it holds fuel for you, so it keeps your torch lit. So as you walk along, you can kind of just, you can see, we're going to just kind of watch it. Do you see how it's dripping? I got a lot of fluid on there. It's still a little drip coming off. And anytime you're using this drip torch, make sure you're conscious when you're setting it down. Do not put it close to your other side of your fire break, because we don't want that fire to get out of control. Or jump the line, as we would say. All right, so as you can see, it's not burning very fast. We got a pretty slow fire. Well, it looks like the wind is blowing this way, so it's gonna be really nice that we can actually go right up our little trail here and just light it up and let it go.
Well, we started.
All right, so we started. I'm gonna go and start doing a drip line. And basically just gonna do like this. All right, so we had also put in a small fire break. This was kind of just to give us a little, create kind of like a small island. And so what we've done is we've been on the opposite side of that little fire break, and we've hit the other side because our fire is going to eventually run out right here. And so we're just going to jump to the other side of that break, because this is the other side of the fire unit that we're burning is going in this direction, which is behind the camera. And eventually, because it's moving slow, and we only have, about probably 3 hours before it gets dark, so we're going to probably end up running through here with some strips just to speed this up a little bit. Alright guys, so this is what would be an example of a spot fire. We're not super far in, but we're within probably 65 feet or so from the main fire line. We're going to do a little spot fire here. This is basically where we'll create a center fire to where it can just go in all directions. Like I said, because we have a low wind today, it's not going to really travel fast anyways. But it does help burn things a little bit faster. Because we don't want to run out of daylight with a fire going out here. So we're trying to get this quarter acre burned off as quickly as possible.
After you have completed your burn, you are going to end it off by going around the whole burn unit with your water pump sprayer and making sure there's no lit trees or any type of fire that's still lit before you leave your burn site. That ends the video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this type of content, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And with that being said, see you in the next video.